サイレントヒル4ザルー
So for the past year I've been following the development of a small indie racing game that you probably haven't heard of. It's Night Runners, developed by a single person, Jim Byrne, who spent 5 years building this game from the ground up. A passion project replicating not only the Tokyo street racing scene, but also the Toge scene, which is currently only promised on Kickstarter. And of course the game oozes with the early 2000s aesthetic, not only from the game's presentation, but also from the trailer for its public demo release and its soundtrack. Consisting of mostly licensed indie jungle drum and bass and partially breakcore soundtrack, which gives me a bit of a creative challenge since I now have to play around copyright, but that's semantics. Now it's time for us to dive in and relive the need for speed. Since the game is only a demo, with the story being only in the first minutes of the game, I will just recap what happens. It is implied that we arrived from a different country to Japan, particularly the fictional Koto and Edogawa cities, with our friend the 2009 British Formula 1 World Champion Jensen Button greeting us. Oi mate, what's up love? Welcome to Japan. It's great to have you here. I know I say you could join my car when you're here, but I sold them all. Plus mate, there's a shoebox in the garage with enough quid inside for a used car. Oh shite, look, I gotta go love. I'll see you around. Thanks to Button's stash of the almighty British pound, we can afford our only car in this demo, the Nissan 180 SX, which you buy on a car auction with possible defects and aftermarket parts, including a different type of transmission, since unlike most games, manual and automatic gearboxes are linked to the car itself, so if you buy an automatic, it's an automatic. Upon fitting any upgrades, changing the oil and leaving the garage, we are brought down to earth. As it turns out, Jensen is in debt, and the loan shark loans us a couple mil to earn back that debt. That's all. You have a debt to repay, 2 gangs to beat, a car to upgrade, and a highway network to drive around, with toll booths, speed traps, and time trials. And that's the best I can tell of any story this game has, with my only guess being that we will have the option to participate in racing gang warfare, as the only 2 gangs in the game, G Company and Endless Appeal, are fighting for control of turf, and are ranked as the 2 worst out of a total 20. So while I beat up G Company, I should talk about the post-scriptum part of the video title. First is some things I personally want to inform you about if you're interested in TXR content on my channel. I am considering making a challenge run for TXR Zero, as well as essays for TXR 3, the PSP Street Supremacy, and Xbox 360 Import Tuner Challenge, which is a part of the franchise originally called Shutoku Battle X, as well as essay for the series Toge-themed spin-off Kaido Battle, or Tokyo Xtreme Racer Drift in the West. Now, time for some comments. First is I recommend reading the pinned comment from the TXR Zero video in its entirety, as it is the best thing I've ever seen in my comment section and makes a great case for Tokyo Xtreme Racer 2, which I wrote off as the game that was remaked as Tokyo Xtreme Racer Zero. Next is these 2 comments, one about Jintei being the pro tag of TXR2, which I personally didn't realize until I received this comment and rushed to check the boss list for TXR2, and the next is from the same guy about Purple Meteor being the protagonist of the original TXR and disagreeing with me calling Unknown a ghost or an illusion. Personally, I want to argue that the game's final ending slides question Unknown's reality, as well as it's obvious that Zero, the black Porsche wanderer I didn't mention since I stupidly lost my footage of him, and Unknown, the blue S30Z, are references to One Gun Midnight, with Zero being the Blackbird Porsche and Unknown being the Devil Z. And in One Gun Midnight, the original drivers of the Devil Z died in car accidents. So it personally would make sense to me that Unknown moved from boss to Wanderer as the original driver, like the Devil Z's, died in an accident. But since Unknown is covered in mystery, even his bio doesn't give much, so I clung to the ending slide. And ultimately in TXR3, he's not even a physical car. Not to mention in Drift 2, he's replaced by Ground Zero, which is an actual driver driving a tuned out Skyline R34. But in Import Tuner Challenge, Unknown is back in the S30Z. But since the game's story is all about the times having passed, I'm keen to believe that Unknown is a new driver, driving the S30Z, kind of like in One Gun Midnight where the protag becomes the new driver of the Devil Z. And look at that, we're already fighting the boss of G Company. The way boss fights in Night Runners work is that at 5000 rep, which I will talk about in a moment, you'll be challenged by a sub-boss to a best of 5 race. In this case it's a 180SX of SK. You know what SK stands for? Stupid Kitten. Speed King. And at 10,000 rep, which is the cap, you have to take on the sub-boss again and the main boss. For G Company it's Star Tamer, driving a Skyline R34. Talking about rep, it's your main way of progression. Earn rep, drive against racers higher up in the food chain, and ultimately challenge the bosses. Not to mention, rep also influences your payouts from races. Now, payouts themselves are influenced by 4 things. Of course, there's the size of the wager between you and your opponent. Next is the cut that you pay to clear your debt. After that, your cut of any side bets placed on you, and at last your night rep bonus, which is listed as a multiplier that you earn based on how much you win in a single night. But what do you do with all of this money? Since wagers quickly grow from less than $500,000 yen to over $1,000,000 yen, and bosses pay out multiple million yen, well, you invest it in your car. You have exterior tuning, which is your body customization including weight reduction through prototype carbon parts, and aerodynamics through spoilers. Interior customizes your car's interior, replacing the stock seats with racing ones, pulling out the back seats, removing floor mats, redoing the dashboard, ripping out the radio, adding aftermarket gauges for oil and water temperature, turbo pressure along with the tachometer/ref counter and speedometer, changing out the stock steering wheel for a racing one, replacing your gear shifter and installing an aftermarket handbrake. Which, by the way, all of this influences your UI and in the case of handbrake, changes its mechanics. Tuning your engine, unlike some games where engine is a single monolithic part, consists of 16 parts, including transmission. From air filters to oil cooling to spark plugs to installing a NOS. Next is the handling category, which consists of brakes, control arms, coilovers, front and rear sway bars, differential and steering knuckle. Wheel category, which allows to change out your rims and tires. Of course there are more options like exterior swaps and engine swaps, but they're not available in the demo. But there's paint options and the livery import tool, which is the first time I see a game make an actual import tool instead of a livery editor, which is useful for people like me who design Itashas or more racing themed liveries with sponsors and racing numbers. There are some other options hidden away behind button prompts, like changing the sound of your turbo spool, lowering your car's suspension and changing tire and rim sizes. Of course, your car needs a tiny bit of maintenance. You need to refuel to the pause screen, and every time you're in your safe house you should check and change oil, and in worst case scenario pay for engine repairs. Akin to TXR, your oil and water can overheat in your car, killing off your engine performance. But unlike in TXR, where it's a ticking time bomb before you have to quit the night or take a break at the pit stop, here it's more of a balancing act. Do you shift early, lowering your acceleration but letting the oil cool a bit, Or do you keep going at high revs, risking the oil overheating in the most crucial moment? This balancing act is also influenced by your upgrades. The beefier the upgrades, the more heat is generated, and unless you invest into powerful coolers, your engine will start overheating. Hell, with a maxed out car there is a constant threat of overheating. Upon beating Star Tamer, we are invited into G Company. I accept the offer, and next night our parking area, which is the meeting area for all the team members, is now overtaken by Endless Appeal, which in this playthrough I found out has a car limit, being that only cars with over 700 horsepower can earn full rep from races. Speaking of races, I mention wagers. As it turns out, akin to Just or Need for Speed Unbound, Night Runners has a wager system, but instead of making bets that go along with the actual payout for the race, the wager is the whole payout. But it's not as simple as just setting a price tag for a race, since you can also be given offers, like getting around 1.5 times the cash if you lose on purpose. Or, after you beat the driver, he might call with a sob story and ask for a double or nothing challenge. If you refuse, you keep the money but lose reputation. If you accept, you get a second race. Also, another new thing is that since all your races are funded by bets, to restart a race you need to pay some cash up front. And if you quit a race, you lose the whole pot. There is also a sort of day passing mechanic where you have only a certain amount of hours in a single night before the game ranks your performance, and you lose your night rep streak. Unlike in TXR where quitting to the garage ended your night by default, though you can still do that by going to your bed in the aforementioned garage. Just like with G Company, Endless Appeal has their own set of sub-boss and main boss, being Sonny driving a Skyline R34 and the head honcho Eternal Sun driving a Porsche. Also in game there's a Toyota Chaser driven by some G Company drivers and Nissan Silvia S15. Upon defeating Endless Appeal, we get an ominous offer from Eternal Sun. We join Endless Appeal and receive a congratulatory SMS on our phone, which is how we set up wager matches with the racers in the first place. So that's that. Whilst I want to give out some criticism, I feel like it will ultimately be pointless as the demo receives constant updates, and comparing the day 1 version of the demo to the current version 1.023 is like a night and day. But there is still some wonky physics, and one personal issue that I think will not be simply patched out, being the remaining cars. Now, these cars are customizable, drivable, have good engine sounds, and are available at the auction. But you can't purchase them or own them, which feels like a bit of a missed opportunity because in my first playthrough I had tens of millions before Endless Appeal took over, and I already had a maxed out car, so I'd probably spend that leftover cash in a Porsche or Skyline. Since the final race with Eternal Sun that time was down to the fucking wire. But this time I rolled through the game with some upgrades still not purchased, and speaking of money, well, I was spending it more, and had to deal with more debts, which cut into my profits. Luckily for that the community already made the Sakura mod, but it also adds some other unavailable features like engine swaps. Now, one of the game's biggest selling points to me was its unapologetic 2000s vibe. VHS filters everywhere, things like faces and license plates are censored with this pixelation effect. All your rivals have these dark silhouettes like in Tokyo Xtreme Racer Drift or Import Tuner Challenge, with bosses having very glitchy silhouettes. Old car radio styled fonts and menus, loading screens akin to the bootleg Russian PS1 3 games in one CDs from my childhood. Music that has that old underground techno club vibe, which hopefully I managed to capture at least a bit. Speaking of audio, the game has great audio mixing. There's gusts of wind when you pass at high speeds, oncoming traffic honks their horns. Even engine sounds start making way as you achieve higher speeds, letting the music take over. And again, not to mention that this is a brainchild of a single man, Jem Byrne. 5 years of passionate work and still going. Whilst I personally won't be donating on Kickstarter, I will buy this game on release, because I genuinely am absolutely stunned by the quality and ongoing support for the demo. This is the secondary demo to fully sell me on a product, the first one being Trepang 2. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you Jim Byrne. You earn yourself a loyal fan. Peace.